Welcome to the Mindful Fit Pro podcast, where fitness professionals learn how to strengthen not just bodies, but minds as well. In this podcast, we chat about all things mindfulness, mental wellness, and the latest in psychological research. Welcome back to the Mindful Fit Pro podcast. I'm your host, Shelly, and the founder of the Mindful Fit Pro. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about something that is usually overlooked. I'm guilty of this myself, but incredibly crucial for our well-being as instructors and ability to continue working as fitness instructors, continue showing up for our classes. And that is rest. As a fitness instructor or personal trainer, I know you're passionate about helping others and you're dedicated to helping people work towards their goals, but sometimes this comes at the sacrifice of your own well-being, especially when we put rest on the back burner. It gets really easy to neglect our own needs, our own self-care, and really easy to overcommit ourselves, to think, yeah, I can pick up another class. I'm already teaching 4, so what's 5? And it can get out of hand very quickly, as I'm sure some of you know. It ends up in us feeling exhausted by the time the week is done, and we're so tired that we can't even rest and recuperate in the weekend or our days off before we have to start a whole new week over again and get back to teaching. We're going to be talking about rest, and we're going to open up the concept of rest past just physical rest, of taking a nap or making sure that you're getting quality sleep. We're going to be talking about taking intentional time to find some me time for yourself that nourishes your mind, body, and spirit. I am really excited to share that the special guest is Klaudia Paletta, who has been my friend since I completed mindfulness meditation teacher training. Klaudia is going to be sharing her insights and strategies for how fitness instructors can practice intentional rest and self-care. I'll also be asking her questions about how life led to her shifting gears with even what she offers in terms of classes and workshops and retreats where people can gather together and actually build community surrounding rest. We'll also talk about different ways that one can rest and overall how we can prevent burnout in ourselves and tend to our own mental health. So find a cozy spot to relax, maybe grab some tea or your other preferred beverage of choice, because it's time to rest, Fit Pros. Welcome, Klaudia, to the Mindful Fit Pro podcast. I'm so happy to have you as a guest and talk about a really important topic that is difficult for us to do as fitness instructors, and that is taking the time to rest. So listeners, Klaudia, we met at a meditation teacher training back in 2020, and became fast friends after being, I don't think it was like intentional that we partnered up. I think it was random, right?
Yeah, it was random. Yeah, I think it was because our last names were like right next to each other or
It's just
something like that.
alphabetical.
Yeah. And for the longest, I didn't know who you were. So it was because, it was an interesting journey. I was thinking about that earlier today. I was like, wow, we've met in 2020, but then didn't physically meet in person, remember, until like 2021, 2022.
Yeah, it was a while. Yeah, it's fate. It brought us together, and we've been friends ever since. I want to take a time to introduce you and have you share a little bit about your business before we dive into the episode. So, Klaudia, you are a bilingual yoga, meditation, and sound bath facilitator. And in my opinion, you are my go-to person for checking in when I need to slow down and be more intentional about rest. And that's why I wanted to have you on the podcast, is so that you could share more about that. So you're the face and the heart and brains and everything behind Pink Means Go. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about your business and how it got started.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me be a guest. We were joking earlier, this is going to be like a part 2, 3-hour podcast, because Shelly and I can really talk for hours about multiple topics. So I'm really excited to be here to share about restful practice, especially for instructors, because I know that for me, that's also a challenge. I'm Klaudia. I am bilingual, like you said, meditation, yoga, and facilitator. I'm the face and spirit behind Pink Means Go, which is a wellness company that is striving to bridge the accessibility gap in wellness by serving underrepresented communities, especially within our Latinx community. So a lot of my offerings are in Spanish or bilingual. They are donation based or free. And I also am teaching online virtually the last Friday of every month, the Wind Down, which I'm excited to talk about how that came about and dive more into that.
Yeah, and you have a lot going on. I feel like every time I talk to you, you're like, oh, I got this new offer to teach here at this retreat, or I got this new class that I can pick up. So you seem to be doing like lots of different things teaching right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I have a little bit of background. I am recovering from a pretty major ankle surgery, so it's been a reemerging back as into teaching. And I think we talked about this before, Shelly. As instructors, when we have that pause, it kind of takes us a little bit of time to jump back in. So I'm trying to be really intentional of the projects that I am taking on, and also like really mindful of that tiny voice that's like, well, we have space, we can do that, we can take another class, we can drive that, we can, so finding that balance right now is something that I'm currently navigating.
Yeah, definitely. I do remember talking about that with you in the 8-week mindfulness course that you went through for the Mindful Fit Pro. And you were very worried about getting back into teaching in person because it's very easy for that momentum to build up almost a little
Mm.
too quickly, in my opinion, where it's like you don't know when to say no because you've missed teaching. And then before you know it, you're like teaching 6 classes back to back. And you're like, how did I get into this position again?
Yeah, yeah. I think there's definitely like I was very honest with you. There was fear, right, of missing out, or fear of like, did I forget how to teach? Like, will the students come back? Because it was I was building my brand, building my business, and then all of a sudden there was like this hard stop that there was nothing I could do. I had to stop. So I've been really mindful as I move forward, not only of like my mental and emotional capabilities, but also honoring my body and honoring where my body is at right now, and recognizing that it's not where it used to be, and giving myself a lot of grace and a lot of compassion, and also holding true that there's still that voice that's like, well, we got to do it, we got to keep the momentum going, we got to keep putting ourselves out there. So I think if there's any instructors that are listening to this that maybe are taking that pause or in that transition of like kind of re-entering teaching, my wish for you is that you meet yourself with a lot of grace and a lot of compassion, and know that it's not easy what we're doing.
It takes so much patience, I think, for instructors because like our job is so physical that when we have an injury, we feel like it's holding us back because we're not able to do things that we used to. And you just like play this constant comparison of like, well, I used to teach this much and I used to do this in my
Mhm.
classes and I used to teach and then go out on a hike afterwards. And you can get really down on yourself that way.
Yeah. And I do want to say, I don't know if I mentioned this, I do have an accessibility trained background, and that has been really beneficial for me in the sense that it's widened my lens as a teacher. I think it's giving me a lot of like creativity, like this sorts of like, for example, prior to my accident, I was teaching more mat classes, and I was only teaching one chair class. And as I came back and was honoring my body and was honoring where I was at, I started leading more chair classes. And chair yoga has really lent itself to this creative space where I'm challenging myself of like, in this moment, I am not physically able to do this, but how can I get the benefits of that pose in a chair while I'm safe and supported? And that's been really fun. And the students that are coming to class a couple of weeks ago, they're like, we could tell you're getting better because you're starting to like challenge us a little bit more. So I think that again, having that mindset of like, not necessarily, oh, I can't do this or I can't get into this pose, but having the mindset of how can I still enjoy the benefits of yoga and make them work and adaptable for me.
And it's probably really helpful for your students too because they might have injuries of their own or even just like if you're teaching in an office setting and somebody doesn't want to or they can't leave their desk and they want to know what they can do without, getting up, going to an entirely different room, what they can do at their chair. I think that's really helpful to
Yeah.
share.
Yeah. I think two things for that. One is, as instructors, we don't know what the students are going through. Like we don't know their history, right? So we don't know if somebody is having a injury. So leading from a position or a place where we are offering options so that they feel comfortable to meet themselves where they're at. And I love the desk yoga. Like that's another offering that I do. Like I go into corporate settings and offer chair yoga. And it's one of my most popular offerings because you don't need a mat, you don't have to change. You can practice right from your chair. I always tell folks, like, you can kind of sneak this like little tweet, like little twists without anybody like really noticing. You can take some grounding breaths without, people not really noticing. But it's a nice way to come back. And like, how many times, I know it's happened to me, I get an email that I've been expecting and I tense and I'm like, wait, let me take a moment to like release. Let me take a moment to, roll my wrists, just notice if I'm holding anywhere. So I think I've been saying this. There's a misconception that chair yoga is easy, and I think that it is not.
No.
And I also would like to challenge people to, what is easy? Because easy is such a spectrum for everybody, right? It's very different.
And it's so needed. I was thinking about you the other day. So my mother-in-law is in acute care recovering from having a stroke. She's in a wheelchair, and we attended a class with her where they were talking about the importance of exercise, and they were doing their little spiel and getting into how, people need to be more active to prevent strokes from happening again. But everybody in the class except for myself and my husband and my sister-in-law were in a wheelchair, and they kind of like looked around the room. They're like, but do what you can. And I was just sitting there thinking, like, that's it? Like, you're not going to offer any classes? Like, there's no instruction on, like, okay, well, how do you do what you can? Because I don't think anybody in that class knew what exercises they could do from their chair. So this is really important work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Now I'm thinking of you and your family.
Oh,
Um, and I think this is one of the reasons why Pink Means Go focuses on those communities that are often, left behind, or maybe not, they're not popular yoga classes, right? Or they're not the I'm trying to see what the word is that I'm trying to find
you're
out.
not like at the forefront of like,
Exactly. Like these populations or communities, they're not at the forefront of like what yoga, what we are presented as yoga is. And in 2020, like when the pandemic was happening, I started sharing yoga with my grandmother, like via WhatsApp, and she was doing chair yoga, and we were rolling our wrists and rolling our joints. And it is the importance of moving our body, and moving our body to where your body is in that moment. And as somebody that is also in physical therapy right now, understanding the importance of like small movements every day, like little by little equals a lot. And it makes me so sad that they were talking about the importance of exercise and being mobile, and how this is something that, folks that have suffered a stroke, kind of need to incorporate into their lives. And then that there was no examples, that there was no like 10-15 minutes of movements that they can do. So I'm thinking of those folks in that class, and just thinking like, oh, like probably wasn't very encouraging.
yeah, yeah. It definitely made me wish you were closer because it was like, oh, glad I could do
Oh,
this.
well, I'm like, I can do it virtually. Just call me. We'll do a virtual session.
You guys, so you
Yeah.
really made this shift, unexpectedly because you weren't expecting to have your accident and going into your recovery journey, rehabilitating your ankle. And it's led to, though, this, I think, in my opinion, really cool shift in your business where now your offers are aligning with what you need in your like recovery, but more importantly, it's aligning with what so many other people need right now in terms of slowing down and resting. So I'd love if you could kind of speak a little to what that transition was like in your business and how you came to that idea of like, okay, I need to pivot.
I grew up in an environment where busyness was celebrated. I come from a retail leadership background, worked for big companies, manage big teams. And I was always like, go, 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 go. And it was so challenging for me to rest, to sit down, especially to rest without guilt and to rest without feeling like I have to be productive, right? Or oh, I'm resting, but I could be doing this or I could be doing that. And I would love to say that that has shifted and I rest without guilt and everything is great, but that is just not true. It's an active practice. But after my accident, I had incredibly limited mobility. And for 2 months, there was not much I could do besides lay on my back and elevate my leg. And it really shifted for me in the sense that I needed to not only physically rest, but I also needed to allow myself to emotionally rest as well. So during this time of recovery, too, I also, this is where you're going to know, like, Claudia, you're supposed to be resting. I went through a teacher training to keep doing just more study. And then I went 8-week mindful fit program with you. So mentally, I was still, very active, but I knew that I wanted to pivot and make a change because if I wouldn't have had my yoga practice and if I wouldn't have taken this time to really meet the experience with kindness and compassion, which is what we learn in meditation, I think that my recovery would have looked completely different. And it was during this time that the wind down was born, which is a space at the end of the month for us busy folks, our busy bees, to schedule restful time for us. And the idea behind the wind down is it started as me in bed with as many pillows and blankets as I could and like propping myself up to allow my body to really release and let go. And then from there, once I started gaining a little bit more mobility, we took it kind of like down to the floor. But I think as instructors, we could be sitting down and we could be reading a book and then all of a sudden like a light bulb goes off. We're like, oh, I should teach that theme class next week. And we grab our phone, right? Or we grab our iPad, or we are sometimes like we're walking and I'm like, oh, this would be a cool flow. Uh, so it can be really challenging to turn that like part off. So the wind down is one of the ways that I'm like, okay, this is something that no matter what is going on in my personal life, I know that I have this scheduled 30 minutes for me to pause and for me to pour back into myself and, hopefully find stillness and relax. The beauty of it is that we can do it from the comfort of our own home. It's only 30 minutes. I think it's, time is precious. And I think 30 minutes out of a whole month, we can definitely pour back into ourselves.
Yeah, I've had the chance to attend, I think 3 now, and they've been really beneficial. And I love that you end them with the option of, like you say goodbye, you have your closing, and then you turn off Zoom so that if you have it playing in headphones or like playing in the background, you can just continue to stay there if you do want to spend longer than 30 minutes. And it's late enough that you could, if you wanted to go to bed early, you could like drift off into sleep right after. So I really enjoy it myself. Josh jokes that it's like my napping time. He's like, oh, are you napping with Claudia? I'm like, yes, yes, I am. I think it's very true for me, at least, with what you're saying of like, it's hard to turn off your teaching brain. You should see like the notes app on my phone because every time I'm reading, it's like stopping at every page and writing down like, oh, that would make a cool social media post, or oh, I should integrate that into one of my courses, or oh, I'm going to use that as a theme in one of my classes. And you think you're resting because you're sitting on the couch reading, but you're not. You're still working, right? Because your brain's like constantly thinking about what you're going to add to your own classes or to your own practice. And it's really hard to shift out of that. I don't know if you know the answer to this, but maybe you have some insight into like why that might be. Like, why is it so hard for us as fitness instructors to rest and to not work?
I feel like if I knew the answer to that, we'd be like millionaires. I do want to say though, that's something that I've kind of learned over this couple of months, like during my recovery process, is like the different types of rest, right? So there's the physical rest, which is us, maybe taking a nap, laying down, practicing that restorative yoga. The sensory rest, which is like, maybe having those noise cancellation headphones. Maybe I love like taking a shower and just like in the candlelight, like that's like kind of like my sensory rest. And then there's like our social rest, so taking time off of social media. And then my favorite type of rest that I find works really well for me, and that I find is when I'm able to turn the volume down on that teacher voice, is creative rest. So I just completed like 100 days of creating art every morning, and that's my meditation in the morning. And I feel like when I'm sitting there, and by no means are they like art pieces that you're going to find in a museum, but it allows me to have this tangible time where I'm sitting there and just creating. And I find that the teacher voice in those moments, it's really silent, because this is just rest for me. And I have found that very, very beneficial, having that creative rest and moving along or in between those restful practices. Sometimes I'm very lucky that you're available, or my rest is going to walk for you on Monday, during our time, and that gets my body outside of that teacher mentality and out into the world, and we're just walking, we're talking. So I think also finding what works for us as restful practices, and being restful practices that we're able to maintain. Because I talk about how sometimes going to a class is luxury, right? I'm like, we have a whole hour, we're going to do Pilates, we're going to sweat, we're going to move our bodies, get all those good feeling hormones. But what if we don't have, that day, you just don't have an hour to do that. So maybe you start taking long hours, and that's your restful practices. Maybe you, before you go to bed, you elevate your legs up against your headboard, and it's 2 minutes of dedicated restful time. So I hope that that helps instructors as they're listening to this. I know we're all very, very different, but I think the one thing that we have in common is that that teacher voice is very strong inside of us.
Yes. And I think that's like really key what you said about, finding what works for you and then making sure that it's something you're doing just for you. It's not that you're
Mhm.
doing it for, ultimately it will improve your life and improve your teaching, but that's not the purpose. You're not doing it for that reason. You're doing it just for the pure reason of you need rest. And it's not like
Yeah.
you have to work a certain amount to get that period of rest where you can do it guilt free. It's like, no, on its own, it's needed every day. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you brought up the point of like, we don't have to rest in order to be more productive. So like when I incorporate restful practices into my life, yes, they're going to help me sustain my body, but I'm really resting because I need it, because I want it. I sometimes I take 15-minute naps before I go teach. I'm like, oh, I gotta teach. I'm gonna teach at 5. So if I go to like if I take a nap at 2, then I'm like doing like all this math calculating in my head. And like you said, yes, it will ultimately, maybe, right, sustain me as a teacher. But in that moment, like I'm listening to my body, and I'm, hey, I need rest. I need to take a moment for myself. And that's okay.
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of, mindfulness practices in general of there's all these long lists of benefits that you get from it, but that's not the goal. That's not why you do it, because maybe that'll happen. Maybe it'll take years for that to happen. The purpose behind it is just to be present and see what's going on and check in so that we're not like walking through life ignoring our needs and ignoring other people's needs and all that. So I think the two go in hand really well, a mindfulness practice and an intentional rest practice.
Yeah, and one of the things that I feel, as you were mentioning, that is, we practice these restorative practices to soothe and calm our nervous system, so that we can I always kind of mention so that we can release, or so we can notice if we're holding unnecessary tension. And then maybe we can invite that unnecessary tension to release. And we have this intentional restful practice so that we can give this time to ourselves. And then if you get a phone call or you get an email and you notice that you're holding unnecessary tension, it might become easier for you to soften and for you to let go. So we're practicing on the mat so that we can pour into ourselves, spend time with ourselves. And just as a meditation practice helps us out, off our cushion, these restorative practices serve and help us in the real world.
So you mentioned a little bit about the wind down, but I'd love if you could share more about that, because I think that once instructors hear how they can participate in it, they're going to be like, yes, I'm doing this every month.
Yes. So the wind down is every last Friday of the month from 7:30 to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You don't have to turn your camera on. You don't need a plethora of yoga or equipment props. You can simply create your own little restful cocoon with pillows. You can bring your pups into the picture if you want, or your pets. You can bring a heating pad, eye mask, whatever really is going to create this atmosphere for you to feel supported and held. And the structure of the classes, we'll open the class. I invite folks to drop in how they're feeling. And the reason for that is to give me an idea of how everybody's feeling, but also to almost mirror each other and check in with each other. So creating this sense of like, oh, like Claudia, you're feeling like that. Like, oh, I'm not the only one. Like, I'm feeling like that as well, or I hear you, like what you're going through is really challenging. We're here for you. Like, kind of to create an aspect of community and to create an aspect of being supported, even though it's virtually. And then what will happen is I'll set us up into one restorative posture. And again, I'll show you, we'll invite all of the blankets. One of my friend jokes like that she just stuffs like the laundry she's got to put away later and she invites it into the mix, and we'll set up the post for the night. And then as we begin to settle, I'll cue a guided meditation. I'll begin to share the theme of the meditation and then invite the breath. And that's it. There is, nothing else you need to do. You don't need to worry about coming back and logging back off. I always close the class with saying goodnight, and then I'll turn off the Zoom, and you're welcome to rest in that position as long as you want. And I know some folks do practice from their bed, kind of going into their bedtime, and others practice, on their mat or on their couch, whatever is available. But really the intention of the wind down is to support busy, tired individuals that have full lives that need and are looking for this intentional rest.
Well, I love it. I hope you definitely continue offering it. And one of the things that I have really respected from our conversations that we have about, what we're doing and what's new in our teaching and just checking in every Monday, like you said, when we go on our walks, is that you are being very intentional with this and you're getting a lot of positive feedback, but you're not then taking that and going in and doing it every single day. You're like, no, this is the end of the month. There's a reason I'm doing this. And you're not jumping into the deep end of like going right back to where we were right before we started doing all this and not thinking about what we're putting on our schedule. So, do you have any advice? Because I think that would be really helpful for instructors to know of you're getting great feedback, people love what you're doing. How do you recognize in yourself, like, okay, is it worth moving forward and doing more of this and adding this? Or do I need to wait and spend a little bit more time and see like kind of how this is going to fit in best with me and everything that I have going on in my life right now? How did you come to that decision? Or if you have any advice for like how other instructors can kind of check in with themselves to note that?
Yeah. I think that's such an important question, because I am getting feedback that it's like, we should do this every Friday, or we should do it, multiple times a week. And that is so lovely to hear. And I'm so grateful that it's landing and resonating with folks. I think that comes back, or, how I'm checking in with myself is, what is my capacity? I truly believe that if I was doing it more often or more frequently, I the Claudia that would show up would be a different Claudia than the Claudia that shows up that Friday with once a month. And I think that's really important as instructors, especially in my experience with the instructors that I know personally. We work multiple jobs on top of our teaching, or maybe, we have one full-time job and then we teach on the side. So I think being really intentional on why we're leading, why we're creating these containers and these spaces, and really checking in with our own capacity, and checking in, after class. One of the things I love is, after class, I'll take a few moments and just journal, how did that class feel for me? If it was a class that felt really in alignment, where in my body did that feel? Like, where do I feel that in my body? How does it feel? Does it feel spacious? Do I feel like, really happy? Or maybe it was a more challenging class, where do I feel that in my body? And going back to your journal, I love your journal because it gives me that, space to also journal, and the affirmations of coming back to myself. So I think as instructors, building this practice of checking in with our body, building this practice of checking in with the offering, and then also sometimes, like, take the compliment. It's okay. You're like, thank you. Like, I'll see you next Friday, kind of be like, I would love to be everywhere and teach all the things and like bring yoga and chair to everybody. But realistically, like, maybe I'll be able to do that for a month, and then I'll be like, nope, won't be able to do it. So I hope that that is helpful advice of just checking in with ourselves, checking in with our capacity, and then being really intentional uh, of the offerings and classes we're sharing.
Yeah. And knowing to say, like, thank you and I love the feedback, but just sitting in that space. Like,
Yeah.
knowing it doesn't mean you have to say yes, 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 yes to all these different things.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. Yeah. Unless it's like a whole body yes, be like, yes. And then you're like, oh, and I don't know if this happened to you, Shelly, like when you're like, oh, yeah, I want to do that. And then you're like, oh, like, maybe I didn't want to do, but like, I already, like, that time of the month, like, it's going to be so busy. Yeah. I think just being really intentional.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to talk about intentional rest and how that shows up either in, your business and what you're teaching, or just in your own personal practice. Before we close out, do you have any last, like, words of wisdom or anything that you want instructors to walk away knowing?
Yes, I would actually love maybe take a few moments to give some resources on, restful practices that folks can find. So, one of my teachers is Octavia Rahim. They have two books, so make sure you can find them online. Sign up for their newsletter. They send like beautiful emails, just reminding us of how rest is sacred, and just beautiful words and poems. And I want to share Radiant Rest by Tracy Stanley. This is one of my teachers. This is a wonderful book. I often finish the wind down with a couple of her words. So here's my restful wish for you in Tracy's words. I invite deep rest into every cell of my being. I trust that I deserve to be supported, nurtured, and held unconditionally. I know that the earth can hold me.
Thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast today. I'm going to link all those resources and links to the books that you mentioned in the show notes. So just send me those links and I'll be sure to add those in, and how to get on the newsletters and everything. But then I also want people to know how to find you. So how can people find you if they're interested, especially in the wind down? Where should they go?
Absolutely. They can find me at www.pinkmeetsgo.com. They can, join the newsletter. I send a little Sunday reminder. I call it like the little Sunday scare. No Sunday scaries here, where it's a restful practice to set up your week. And then they can also find me on Instagram at Pink Means Go. And I'm excited to continue to support rest, especially for fitness movement instructors.
Awesome. And you're in the Mindful Fit Pro community group on Facebook too. So if you listen to the episode and you're like, Klaudia seems really cool, I know she'd love to chat with you in there.
Yes.
Alrighty. Well, thank you so much, Klaudia. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Mindful Fit Pro podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening in on the conversation that I had with my friend Klaudia Paletta. Hopefully, through this episode, you can start to prioritize your own well-being by tending to your self-care and setting aside time for intentional rest, whether that be taking a peaceful yoga class for yourself where you don't have to worry about teaching, or setting out your mat and laying down for a guided progressive relaxation, or even napping on your couch without the guilt that you're taking time to rest for yourself. It is so important as fitness professionals that we prioritize our own well-being. Your mental health is so important. And this month, May being Mental Health Awareness Month, I really want to show you all the different ways that you can focus on your mental health. In this episode, you got to learn about the importance of rest. And in our upcoming episode with Brittany Labatz, you'll learn the tools of nervous system regulation to help yourself show up with confidence to teach, connect with the people that come to your classes, and overall feel more of a sense of peace and contentment with where you are in your fitness instructor journey. I encourage you to take what you've learned from today's episode, and if you are on Instagram or Facebook, tag Mindful Fit Pro to show me how you are incorporating intentional rest into your schedule. Maybe it is scheduling time for rest during your week. Maybe it's considering rest periods as you're making your teaching schedule, or maybe it's learning to set firm boundaries and respect those boundaries, knowing that it's okay to say no to clients, and especially when they come to you and say how much they love your class and they want you to teach more, finding the comfort in recognizing that that's an incredible compliment to your skills as a teacher, but it doesn't mean you have to add more to your plate. I also want to take a moment to just say thank you for all of the support that I've received so far in making the Mindful Fit Pro podcast. This is definitely something where I am stepping out of my comfort zone as a typically pretty shy, introverted person. So to broadcast my voice out there and get such positive feedback has just been really, really nice. And I appreciate each and every one of you as listeners. I value your feedback. I value your input. So I would love to see comments on this episode about insights and takeaways, and any comments you have for me or questions that you want me to explore in future episodes. I am here for it. And if you can, I would love to see more followers and likes on these episodes that I've released. So if you enjoy the podcast, if you like this content, please consider hitting that follow button. It's the easiest way that you can show your support for the podcast. And if you leave a review, it only helps spread the reach and allow more fitness instructors to hear the Mindful Fit Pro podcast. All right, instructors, I hope you have an incredible rest of your day. And until next time, happy teaching.